You're watching the show that puts Mid-Michigan news in focus. This is Focal Point.
Tonight on Focal Point, we'll break down what the recent congressional budget sequester means for MSU and how it may affect students.
What will happen to Venezuela now that President Hugo Chavez has died? Well, many think it's an opportunity for change. I'm Molly Cassidy, and I'll have that story coming up.
But first, with the installation of a new pope, how are local Catholics responding?
Focal Point starts now.
Hello, I'm Chris Ryan.
And I'm Courtney Moore. Welcome to Focal Point. After Pope Benedict's resignation, there was much speculation about who would be elected as the 266th pontiff. Now that a new pope has been chosen, we talked to local Catholics to see how they are reacting. As the cardinals deliberated in the papal conclave for 2 days, many Catholics like Father Anthony Strauss of St. John's Church and Student Center were left wondering.
I knew the front runners, and I know their names, but I also thought you never know who's going to be elected pope.
Some Catholics like MSU senior and St. John's intern Derek Peterman are excited for the change.
Because that means that it can grow, but also adapt to the people and to the times in the world.
Katie Diller is the director of student outreach at St. John's and says she prayed for someone who could take on the challenges of being pope.
We need a bit of a reformer and strong administrator, but more than anything, we need someone who reveals the person of Jesus Christ to the world.
And in the continuance of prayer,
I kind of thought it would be somebody outside of Europe, just to kind of bring a little bit more unity to the church.
They continued to wonder and speculate who would be next to ascend to the papacy. But once the smoke turned white at the Sistine Chapel, people everywhere knew a decision had been made. The staff from St. John's gathered at St. Thomas Aquinas Church as they waited for the news.
I'm on my phone scrolling to see, who is this? And eventually the news coverage said it was Jorge Maria Bergoglio from Argentina, and I was totally surprised.
Being that this election included many firsts, that wasn't all that caught Father Strauss's eye.
I was surprised too because he chose the name Francis. That name had never been chosen before.
And Pope Francis seemed to leave a lasting impression on many of the Roman Catholics.
He was so sweet when he walked out onto the balcony. He captured our hearts.
Katie says she was quite emotional when he first greeted the gathering crowds.
When he bowed to the people and asked for their blessing before he blessed us. That was probably the most powerful moment of the entire experience.
Meantime, while Father Anthony says he wasn't sure who they'd choose, he referred back to an old saying.
He who enters a conclave a pope leaves a cardinal. That is, those who are most favored to be popes usually don't end up getting elected.
Pope Francis celebrated the inaugural Mass Tuesday at the Vatican. Originally from Argentina, he is the first Latin American Jesuit to lead the world's 1.2 billion Catholics.
As Latin America celebrates Pope Francis of Argentina, Venezuelans are flooded with controversy over who will be the next president after the death of Hugo Chavez earlier this month. What will this mean for their struggling country? Focal Point's Molly Cassidy has that story.
It was no secret Socialist President Hugo Chavez of Venezuela battled health issues during his 14-year reign.
On President Chavez's Twitter feed, his last tweet said, "I am still clinging to Christ and am confident in my doctors and medicine. Always up to victory, we will live and we will win."
But after a number of cancer treatments, he died earlier this month.
You either love Chavez or hate Chavez.
MSU graduate student Juan Marcano left his home country of Venezuela, not only to seek a better education,
want to get out of this hell,
but to escape the turmoil, he says, came with Chavez's presidency.
I do agree with that. I saw that there are many good intentions toward poor people.
And remember that we had a very...
MSU journalism professor Dr. Manuel Chavez is also the former associate director of the Center for Latin American and Caribbean Studies.
You need to keep in mind that this is a country with a lot of people that they don't have anything.
Chavez, no relation to the former president, says,
"It's a wonderful opportunity for the opposition to regroup."
The opposition is Henrique Capriles, who lost to Chavez in the last election, while interim President Nicolas Maduro runs against him.
If Mr. Maduro follows the same pattern as Chavez in terms of the same practices, this is going to be bad.
Dr. Chavez also consults the U.S. on Latin American relations and says regardless of who's elected, changes need to be made.
There's a lot of poverty. Crime is going up in Venezuela. Crime, poverty, inflation.
Marcano agrees Venezuela is struggling in many ways, but it's the crime that concerns him the most.
My brother-in-law, and he got into a fight to someone that he had a weapon. He shot him.
Seen here, Juan and his wife were robbed at gunpoint, and his mother-in-law, seen here in pink, was kidnapped twice in exchange for money and her car.
He was a leader as a politician, but he was an awful manager.
With the election in April, the world will have to wait patiently to see if either of the candidates will make a significant change. For Focal Point, I'm Molly Cassidy.
A funeral service for President Chavez was held in Caracas with Cuban President Raul Castro and Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad in attendance. His supporters will be able to say goodbye as his body will be on display in a local museum.
The sequester, the automatic spending cuts recently put into effect when the federal government could not reach an agreement on the debt ceiling, is one of the hot topics around the country right now as Congress and the president continue to struggle to find common ground. But how exactly is it affecting Michigan State? Focal Point reporter Jack Crawley is on campus now to break it down. Jack?
Thanks, Courtney. Well, D.C. politicians have sure heard their fair share of criticism when it comes to the recent sequester. The failure of both sides of the political spectrum to come to an agreeable budget solution has led to cuts that the whole country is feeling. But I talked to Michigan State's financial aid director to see if students here are isolated from its effects.
The so-called sequester.
Sequestration.
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 Sequester. It's the nation's newest buzzword.
Sequestration was designed to be kind of a draconian act of Congress to say if they couldn't reach a budget resolution, they were going to cut all of the programs across the board.
The wide-reaching cuts are split 50-50 between defense and domestic spending, both mandatory and discretionary. This includes education. So what are the effects here on Michigan State's campus? Richard Shipman, the university's director of financial aid, says,
we're pretty well, protected here from what's happening with sequestration at Michigan State.
Not every school is so lucky, but students at Michigan State who feel like the sequester is weighing heavier on them and their loans than a backpack full of books can breathe easy. The higher education cuts are split between campus-based aid and the origination fee, or the fee that any borrower must pay to acquire student loans. The campus-based aid encompasses work-study programs, the federal Perkins Loan, and the Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, or SEOG. These programs depend on a fair share formula to determine how aid is allocated to schools.
What happened now as they've cut the funding is that we weren't getting our fair share to start with, so we're not actually getting cut.
Cuts to federal assistance with origination fees actually mean that the fees will be increased, but Shipman says these increases are not of much concern.
For the average undergraduate student who, is taking out $7,500, it's an extra, $4.
The biggest increase will be seen in the PLUS loan program for graduate students and parents of undergraduate dependent students, which is getting bumped from a 4% fee to a 4.212% fee.
What that ends up being, though, is $21 increase fee on every $10,000 that they borrow.
Shipman urges people who are concerned about the sequester to contact their congressional representative and try to get them to understand that
you may need to cut things to balance the budget, but don't cut student aid.
But the bottom line for Michigan State students and parents is
don't worry about sequestration when you think about student aid.
So maybe that buzzword isn't so scary after all, at least here at Michigan State. There you have it. The average Michigan State student won't feel any major impact from sequestration. But what about ROTC students? I went to Demonstration Hall, that building behind me in the distance, to see how the program is handling the cuts.
Attention! Right face.
National Defense has seen the steepest cuts made in the sequester to any one department overall. So, possibly the biggest impact at Michigan State from these across-the-board cuts will be felt by military ROTC students, as funding for the tuition assistance program has been frozen.
Absolutely, there's concern. You know, that this is a way that some of them had planned to pay for college.
But Lieutenant Colonel Jeff McDonald, chairperson of Michigan State's Military Science Department, says that students currently using tuition assistance will still receive its benefits.
Suspension is to new applications. So everybody for this semester is taken care of.
Here at Demonstration Hall, where the Spartan Battalion trains, students wish that the sequester hadn't cut the tuition assistance program, but they understand that it's a sign of the times.
I know it's tough economic times. Everyone's got to tighten up their belts a little bit, including the government.
Not all is grim for future enrollees. Lieutenant Colonel McDonald reminds prospective ROTC applicants that there are other options for funding.
Virtually everyone that qualifies for tuition assistance also has the GI Bill. So then they could use the GI Bill instead of the tuition assistance.
Prior to the sequester, tuition assistance was available to all ROTC students that completed basic training. Aid is available through the GI Bill after they complete advanced individual training. ROTC students can also apply for the same financial aid and grants that any other student can. Plus, there are specialty scholarships available for them.
Kent Dell, the president of the Student Veterans Association here on campus, they send a lot he sends updates to me pretty regularly of scholarship opportunities for veterans in particular.
Lieutenant Colonel McDonald realizes that there isn't much he or anyone can do to lobby against these cuts. He just hopes that a budget solution to reverse sequestration and allow for targeted cuts rather than the current across-the-board ones comes quickly.
It's a great program, and I hope that it's back in place before long.
Until then, members of the military here at Michigan State and across the country must continue to march on. Since sequestration began after the March 1st deadline for a deal, President Obama and congressional leaders have been meeting to work toward a budget resolution that can reverse its effects. Hopefully we'll see that happen soon. Back to you in the studio.
Thanks, Jack. Well, it may not feel like spring, but the orange barrels mean warmer weather can't be very far away. Several big construction projects have already started in East Lansing. Here's a look at what's causing the early traffic headaches. Green, yellow, red, stop. Orange, in snow. That's right, a $5.5 million project funded by the state brings East Lansing the inevitable repeating sound. And mangled sites at an unordinary time. As you can tell from behind me, there's construction going on just about everywhere in East Lansing, but there's 3 places this early spring that's affecting businesses the most.
We just don't want people to be scared to come downtown.
Currently, there's a triangle of construction going on: Michigan Avenue, Harrison Road, and Grand River Avenue, taking the brunt of the hit.
The lovely Michigan weather, tears up the roads. We got to redo them.
The state may think road resurfacing, intersection improvements, and signal upgrades to be well worth it, but Crunchie's manager Mike Kruger has his reservations.
It does actually take a little bit longer. They slowed down the speed limit there to 25 miles an hour, and there's no turn lane anymore. It could keep some potential people who typically drive through town from wanting to drive through town, so it kind of it affects the drive-by business.
John Miller, owner of the Grand River Cafe, brings up the good that construction will provide.
There's a lot of potholes out there that are forming on it. It does need to be worked up. It will help with the sidewalks when they get the sidewalks rectified, as far as making it easier for wheelchairs to access that.
But he offered his fears as well.
I think the noise and the odors produced when they start digging up the asphalt and putting the asphalt down will affect people's desire to go in the downtown area.
With much more construction to come later this spring and summer, only time will tell how much the local economy will be affected. The work began March 4th and will continue to expand through the summer until early October.
Man, that construction's really been slowing me down in the morning.
You could just walk like I do.
Yeah, that'll happen. Coming up, how MSU seniors are dealing with the stress of what to do in these final weeks of classes.
And will you be seeing the MSU drumline in the theater near you? Find out after the break.
The day we created a cancer drug that saved millions of lives began like any other day. And when we developed a new way to purify the world's water supplies, it might have been a Tuesday or possibly a Thursday. And whether it's alternative energy or better food safety, the next time we help create a solution to one of the world's great problems, we'll be proud. Then we'll get back to work. Michigan State University. Spartans will.
Welcome back. Some MSU students had the chance to play a part on the big screen.
Here to tell us all about it is Focal Point's Molly Cassidy with this week's on-campus report. Molly?
Thanks, guys. MSU has another claim to fame now that members of our Spartan marching band were cast in the new Disney movie Oz the Great and Powerful. 10 members of the drumline were chosen to perform as Winkies in the movie. The guys had no trouble performing the music, but 8 of them didn't quite meet the 6'5" minimum height requirement. An exception was made for members like Cody Edgerton and Jason Alkist, standing at about 5'10". The students filmed the movie back in 2011 at a soundstage in Pontiac with film director and Spartan alum Sam Raimi. Despite the excitement, the members were disappointed when they found out their scene got cut. Drumline instructor John Weber says it was a great experience though, and they have high hopes of showing up in the DVD.
They had really incredible costumes. I would stand about 2 feet from them and I wouldn't be able to recognize them. It was the makeup artists were incredible. We were treated very professionally, and it was a great experience for the students. The one thing that we were disappointed in is that I guess our scene didn't make the final cut.
The box office hit starring Mila Kunis and James Franco is now in theaters. And there's big news for 4 MSU students coming from the South by Southwest Convention in Austin, Texas. The students created an app called Tempo Run, which they entered in this year's Student Startup Madness competition. Tempo Run's goal is to improve a user's run by setting a music playlist to a user's specified pace, while also tracking data to improve future runs. They beat out 8 other college teams from 7 different states in the final round and won $5,000 from the Google Cloud platform, which will help them continue developing and improving its services.
It was definitely an experience, and we're hoping that we'll be back on a bigger scale next year and be able to have our own booth set up there and kind of inform people about Tempo Run and the experience moving forward.
Tempo Run is set to release a limited beta version in early April, with a massive launch in early May. You'll be able to find it just for $1.99 on the iTunes App Store. One organization on MSU's campus is feeling awfully lucky after a St. Patty's Day fundraiser last weekend. There wasn't a lot of green on the ground for this year's MSU Shamrock 5K run, but that didn't stop more than 400 people from coming out and racing for a cause. Organized by the MSU Tower Guard, the race raised a record $8,000 for the Resource Center for People with Disabilities and is the biggest event put on by the group. Tower Guard member Patrick Vaughn explained what the proceeds help.
We raise money for them so that they can provide Braille for the blind students, so that they can create the e-texting, which is an online textbook. Basically what we do is we scan regular books into the computer and then we edit it and format them so that they can use the programs and have the extra time out of class to read them. Or for the visually impaired students, they actually have programs on the computers that read the textbooks to them. So it just goes through, and so it's just making it easier for them.
The MSU Tower Guard was founded in 1937 and has been working to raise money for various charities ever since. For many, March means the start of spring, March Madness, St. Patrick's Day, and spring break. But for some MSU seniors, it means only 2 months left to figure out what their next step will be. Focal Point's Elliot Grandia shows us how seniors are dealing with the stress.
Isn't that part of it? It's not exactly what you would call an easy spring semester for health communications senior Sarah Sheff.
So typically days are 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. every day.
Between class, research meetings, work, and instructing Zumba, Sheff barely has time to, well, eat.
So it's a little complicated, but yeah.
Let alone plan for her future.
It's terrifying.
The stress of figuring out what life will look like beyond undergrad, all while still taking classes and working, can be an overwhelming process.
And then I started, looking for schools in the summer, and then I started essays in October. Applying to grad school and preparing for it is not just this little sit down and write an essay process.
And for Sheff, with the grad school applications mostly complete and interviews dwindling, the waiting game has proved to be even harder.
I went through a lot of kind of a roller coaster of, yeah, everything's definitely going to work out, to my lowest of like, oh wow, I'm not going to get it anywhere. I'm not going to find a job. And
one of the largest MSU graduating classes expected to walk here for their diploma, all competing for jobs, internships, and graduate school spots, it's no surprise that students are feeling a little uneasy. Like Chef, first-year medical student Austin Lomberg remembers a time when he didn't know exactly what he was going to do.
When I got my score back, I realized that it's not very competitive compared to other people's scores.
But now in his first year of med school, Longberg has some keen insight on how seniors can manage the emotional overload of graduating under uneasy circumstances.
A lot of people that do know what they want to do in their future, you know, don't always get that position right away either.
As Longberg said, life doesn't always work like you want it to. But with hard work, things have a way of working themselves out, as was the case for Chef.
I got into 3 grad schools. I only got rejected from 1, but I didn't really want to go there, so it was okay.
Though the stress for Chef isn't completely erased, pushing through can now allow her to breathe a sigh of relief. For Focal Point, I'm Elliot Grandia.
Good luck to all you graduating seniors out there. That's it for On Campus. Back to you guys at the desk.
Thanks, Molly. Well, coming up, March Madness is underway, and Spartan fans are ready to see the team take it all the way.
But it's not all about basketball. We have the scoop on tennis and spring football after the break.
They've been called leaders, lifesavers, and world changers. They're also called Spartans.
Welcome back. Well, it's the most exciting time of the year for college basketball fans, as March Madness is now in full swing. The MSU men's basketball team got to stay close to home with a trip to Auburn Hills, playing their first game against Valparaiso on Thursday. The Spartans had no trouble handling the Crusaders. Senior Derek Nix led the team with 23 points and 15 rebounds. Coach Tom Izzo likes the idea of playing close to home, but is making sure his team doesn't get too comfortable.
But to be here for our families, to be here for travel, to be here for hopefully a bunch of Spartan fans that'll get to go to the game and save costs, or be here for every reason is good, yet you still got to play the games.
The Spartans will now head to Memphis on Saturday in hopes of a trip to the Sweet 16. Meanwhile, the women's basketball team awaited their tournament fate last week to see who they would play in the first round. The Spartans earned a 5 seed and will head to College Park, Maryland for the second straight year, this time against Maurice in the first ever meeting. Coach Susie Merchant says the team is going into tournament with only some momentum.
You know, I felt good about the way we finished and how hard we fought, and feel good that we have an opportunity. We're going back to a place we were exactly 1 year ago, so we're familiar with where we're going.
Tip-off time for the women's game is 1:30 Saturday afternoon on ESPN2. As the Spartans gear up for March Madness, so do their fans. It's the craziest, most intense month of basketball out there. That's why for this week's Sidewalk Survey, we asked students to pick their Final Four and national champion.
Final Four, obviously Michigan State, because they're going to win it all.
I'm a little Big Ten heavy. I have Michigan State.
Michigan State. I have Michigan State.
Michigan State, for sure. Not quite sure about my Final Four yet, but I would definitely like to see Michigan State have a nice battle with Indiana at the end again.
Ohio State, Indiana, and then Georgetown is the odd man out there.
Gonzaga, they've been playing really good for a long time. They've been fighting.
OSU, Kansas State, and Indiana.
Indiana, they're playing really well, so I'll go with them.
The only thing I know for sure on mine is I got Michigan losing first round.
My giant killer is going to be Minnesota. Dick Vitale's saying they're going to go a long way, so even though they're an 11 seed, I think they'll go pretty far.
And then after that, I know nothing about basketball, so we're going to win, and that'll be awesome, and I'll be happy.
I got MSU going all the way. We might not be the best team, but I trust Izzo beyond belief.
Of course I do. Michigan State winning it all.
Of course. Got to show your Spartans pride.
Putting faith in Tom Izzo certainly isn't a foolish thing to do at this time of year. Let's hope they pick the right one and the Spartans bring home another national title back to East Lansing. Well, with the focus on March Madness, it's hard to believe it's time for football, but spring practice is underway. MSU worked out last week in hopes to get warmed up for the annual green and white spring scrimmage. The theme of spring practice is finishing and finding inches, referring to last year's season losses where there are many slim margins. 13 points separated the team from being 6-6 and 11-1. With a couple new assistant coaching changes, the team expects to see some strategic changes too. Players are happy to get back to work.
Oh, it felt good. You know, I really miss being out there with the guys. So it just felt good. You know, a little rusty on some things, but at the same time, me and Travis spoke about it. You know, we're just blessed to be back out there with our brothers.
It's just finding those inches and finding a way to, you know, make up for those in the off season. We can't, you know, necessarily play the games tomorrow, but we can do something today to make sure we're in a better position next year.
The spring game is April 20th. And finally, the 52nd ranked Michigan State tennis team hosted 40th ranked rival Michigan at the MSU Tennis Center. The first conference matchup of the season excited crowds from beginning to finish. Fans got to see the Spartans take an early 2-0 lead, only to have Michigan rally right back. Senior Dennis Bogatov gave the Spartans their third and final point in 2 sets. But it was not enough as the Wolverines claimed a 4-3 victory. Senior captain Will Davis talked about the rivalry.
We always love playing them. More than half of us are from Michigan, and I'm from Kentucky, but I still love playing Michigan.
The Spartans will try to rebound in conference games against Minnesota and Wisconsin this weekend in East Lansing. That's what's happening in sports. I'm Elliot Grandia.
Thanks, Elliot. Well, if you love the taste of fresh golden pancakes topped with sweet, gooey goodness,
then you would have liked last weekend's Maple Syrup Festival. Families came out to Fenner Nature Center for the annual event to try the maple cream, maple sugar cotton candy, and all-you-can-eat flapjacks with plenty of maple syrup. Parents watched as their little ones learned to tap trees for sap, and out in Fenner's Sugar Bush, the kids heard tales of how the pioneers and Native Americans harvested and cooked the sweet treat. Organizers say they couldn't be happier with the turnout.
Well, this year our festival is just one day, so the attendance is so amazing and different. I know we ran out of parking for a while there. The amount of people that have come out today is so heartwarming, and the weather has really held out. Last year it was 80 degrees. People were running around in tank tops and shorts. It's a little atypical of this time of year, so this is nice to see a balmy weather for March and have people still be able to come out and see the sap flowing.
Governor Snyder just declared March as Michigan Maple Syrup Month to recognize Michigan as 7th in maple syrup production in the nation.
That's like really good.
Really? I could go for some flapjacks right now.
Me too. Well, finally tonight, the Wharton Center for Performing Arts is now nationally recognized as the top university venue among those that hold between 2,000 and 5,000 people. Venues Today magazine notes that the Wharton Center brought in a little more than $6 million last year.
So we leave you now with highlights of the show American Idiot, which opens at Wharton Center April 9th. Good night.
Don't wanna be an American idiot. Don't want a nation under the new media. Hey, can you hear the sound of hysteria? The subliminal mic America. Welcome to a new kind of tension.